All right, so let's talk about colors and how HTML uses different variations of colors to say the same thing. What does that mean? Well, let me see if I can help. So w3schools.com, that's always a good place to start. That sounds like a song. And then I'm going to, here's a good example, background color, light blue, white. Okay. So anyway, the point was that if I scroll down here far enough, I get this thing called a color picker, and I'm going to click on that for a short run. And if the default value that's showing up is, there's this red, so that makes sense, that's red. But there's also some other ways to describe red using HTML. One is with this hashtag FF0000, that's weird. RGB25, and then there's some numbers in a parenthesis, that's weird. And then this HSL, and then you might even see a variation of RGBA and HSLA. So I'm going to try and explain some of the differences here. So red is pretty self-intuitive, makes sense. And then what I'm going to jump to this RGB next, and RGB stands for red, green, and blue. So these numbers are variations of red, green, and blue respectively. And it's no different than like when you're in kindergarten and you got some red and some green and some blue, and you got different amounts of each, and you poured them into the middle of the floor, and before you got in trouble, you saw a lot of different colors depending on how much of each color you mixed into the paint, into the pot. So I'm going to click on this bar that's showing the red here. I'm going to click on it, and I get this nice little pop-up. So what we're seeing here is the red, green, blue, and we see 255, 0, and 0. And then we see what that color would look like. This other value is used a lot more in graphic design when we're sending things to a printer, and that stands for Hue Saturation and Luminosity. So these are equivalent values, but you're going to see RGB in this hashtag and probably either combination of these two more than anything else. So I'm going to pretty much ignore the Hue Saturation and Luminosity, although it all applies. And so the idea is this value is in percentages, how much light. This is based on, like, if you've shown a light onto like a projector, a light onto a wall, how much hue, saturation, percentage, and luminosity. But again, I'm going to deal with the red, green, and blue. So red, then 255. If I have 255 is the highest value. So there's no 256. It'll go from 0 to 255 depending on how much, let's just say that number for now. In other words, I'm going to make this back to 0. And you're going to see that if there is zeros in all of red, green, and blue, I'm getting black. If I have 255, which is the highest value of each of those, that combination of colors, full strength of red, green, and blue is going to equal white. If I do 0 red and 255 green and no blue, then I should be getting a green. And so same scenario with the blue. So this is just combinations of those values, okay? So if I slide the slider or I click anywhere in here, obviously I don't have just red, green, and blue. If I like this pretty purple, then I'm going to get 214, 27, and 228 to get this color. So if I were using this in my HTML, I could use RGB 214, 27, 228 to produce this color. So let's see how this relates to this hashtag. And I'm going to go kind of off kilter here, but I would want to know, so I'm going to give that to you. So what is this then? What is FFF? FF. Well, I'm going to take you to this Ascii chart, and I'm going to share with you that the XXX is a hex value, meaning that we understand decimal. We understand 0 to 10, 11, 12. Which is called base 10. And all I really want you to see here, I don't care if you understand it or not, because it's kind of outside of the scope of this, but there's hex value is a base 16, which means that we can, for example, we represent 10 with the letter A. A only takes up 1 character, 10 takes up 2 characters, and so this is a way for us to shortcut the same thing. In other words, I can represent 10 with the letter A and 11 B and so forth, but because it's base 16, I have 0 through 16 characters, and then it stops and starts again, meaning that 10 is equal to A, 11 is equal to B, 12 is C, etc. But once we get to F, we kind of start again. So then you'll see 10, 11, 12, 13, and then we get down to 1A, which is represented by 26. So let me share this with you. Again, I don't expect you to memorize all of that. I just want you to take it at face value with this chart. But I'm going to go to this decimal to hexadecimal converter. So here is a way for me to do that conversion. And I told you that 255 is the highest value of that. If you remember right, I said 255 is the highest value of red, green, and blue that we can get. So if I type in 255 and I click on convert, it apparently FF represents 255. Again, FF taking way much less space than characters than 255, which is why programmers use this. And so if I take this idea that FF is equivalent to 255, and I look back here, it turns out that hex value, that's what hex means. This is a base 16 number. And the first two numbers are what's going to represent the red, which we just saw FF is equivalent to 255. Green is 0. So if we put FF, let's try this. Let's do FF, 0, 0. So what we're doing there is this is the red value, 255. This is the green, amount of green, 255 and 0. So that combination equals yellow. So this is exactly the same thing as this. And sometimes, not all the time, but using HTML, sometimes we also get HTML gives us an equivalent English word. Not always. For example, let's just click on something else. I'm going to click randomly on any of these bars. Oh, I didn't click randomly enough. There we go. This particular one has no HTML equivalent English word, but it is still represented with this pound sign. Again, the red combination, that's a hex value, which is equal to decimal 102. This is equal to 102, and then we've got 0. So any combination of red, green, blue, or representing those same numbers with a hex value, we have different ways to describe a color by mixing red, greens, and blues. So I'm going to pull up a web page here and show you an example of one thing, and that was where we add the A at the end of each of these. All right, so I just have a simple page set up here to demonstrate some color ideas. So I have some A tags. I've given them some padding, so it kind of pushes them away from this background there. It gives them some padding from the edges, because we did that in this week. So we have border radius, just makes those edges rounded. That's kind of nice. But the background color is gray. So if I wanted to try something else, let's just put in the word gray here just to kind of bring the point home. So I'm going to click on OK. And gray is represented by the hex value, hashtag 808080. So I could put that in there. It would be the same thing. Or the RGB value, that would be the same thing. Or I can, let's pull something else out. I don't know. So I could do it with a asterisk. Hashtag CCC. So I could just replace gray with CCC. I'm going to get a different color of gray in the background. So, okay. So again, just giving you a visual that we have different ways to represent color. And so now what I've done is I've decided I'm going to put a hover event. So if we hover over one of those A tags, we're going to get a different color. And I put an A in here, so let me explain what that is momentarily. So before we go on, we can recognize, and we've seen from our examples, that RGB is red, green, blue. So I don't know what the 1 is yet and the A is yet, but you're telling me that based on what I saw in the last example, if we hover over an A, the background color should change to red, because we have full red, no green, no blue. So, and that's in fact exactly what happens. So that's super cool. Okay, so of course you can change that, but if I want to, let's see, let's look at what 1 means. The values here, this means alpha channel, and alpha channel is a fancy word for opacity, which is a fancy word for can I see through that value? can I see through that image? Like sometimes you might see some text and you can sort of see through the text and see the image behind it or something like that. So 1 is the highest value. So that's a solid red. Your lowest value is 0. So anything in between 0 and 1 is what goes into your alpha channel. And what 0 means is I can't see it at all. Oh, I have to refresh my page. And so now I can't see anything at all, right? It's just the value, that color is transparent. So if I do halfway in between, let's try a 0.5, and halfway in between, now I get a more translucent red, which actually looks pink. So, and you can do different variations of that. Maybe we do 7.75. And so this alpha channel is a way for us to adjust opacity, and we can do opacity with color, we can do opacity with images, but that's what RGBA would stand for. So we don't have if I want to make this background color with some opacity, with some translucence, I can't, because this particular, we only have this hex value. So if we're going to use a hex value, we don't have the ability to do anything with transparency. I could do RGB, then I would have to leave off the alpha channel portion, that alpha off option, and now I just get that solid red. Or I could do any combinations of these. So if I did, I don't even know what this will be, but let's try 50 and let's try 100. I don't even know what that color would be. I'm just throwing out numbers because I know the highest value is 255. So now I can come, oh, that's definitely too dark. So now let's try and add an alpha channel, and we'll make it a little bit more transparent. 0.5, and save that. And now if I refresh it, we should see a lighter blue. So anyway, hopefully this video gives you some insight as to what different color notations mean, and then you can always come into this color picker and put in these values if you're not sure. So if I didn't know what, I could put this in. If I didn't know, let's put in, let's just try RGBA. Well, it's not going to do the A part, but let's just try this. So if I didn't know what a value was, there we go, it is in here. There we go. So I could do, I don't think that A is working. So let's just do an RGB color. I don't know. Let's try it and see. That's how you learn. Just try things and see. Yeah. So the A part wasn't working in this picker, this color picker, but it definitely gave me the idea that this is a dark blue. And then I don't have an English variation of the word, but I definitely have the hex value if I wanted to use that, or I have the RGB value, or the RGBA with some translucent, which gave us a little bit lighter color when we hovered over. So anyway, hope this video was helpful.